Well, hello everyone. Welcome to New Mexico. We're expecting 55-mile-an-hour winds later today. It's going to be brutal. Hence, I am inside. I've got a very, very busy day. I have to start production on a blurb-specific film. It's a 45-second 9x16 social media film that involves a ton of stuff I don't know how to do. And it involves compressing the entire experience of making a book into 45 seconds, from downloading the software to getting it in the mail and opening it. So I'm in for a long and painful day with my filmmaking abilities. Just finished Of Human Bondage, Somerset Maugham. A little difficult. I'll be completely straightforward. A little difficult. You have to want that book. It is a bit cruel and a bit depressing. It does end on a slightly upbeat note. It took me a while. There were times where I wanted to just go sit in the corner and coddle my inner child. This morning, I started American Dirt. This baby is good. If you like Mexico, if you like the cartel situation, that's good. And by the way, the blurb was written, Grapes of Wrath of Our Time by Don Winslow, and he knows a fair thing or two about the border and the cartels. So good reviews. I'm giving it a thumbs up, even I'm only like 60 pages in. All right, this is a Q&A, and I really want to thank everybody. I went on YouTube, I said, hey, it's time for another Q&A because I don't have time to do anything else. And a bunch of people wrote in with a bunch of really good questions. But I need to start with a bit of a rant here, like I did last Q&A, because I saw something on LinkedIn yesterday from someone who I really respect, who has a great track record, and was talking about a publishing project, which I'll get to in a minute. But also yesterday on LinkedIn and on Twitter, I saw publishing industry people that were propagating a myth that has really hurt a lot of people over the last several decades, and a lot of people that I've encountered personally over the last decade working in the job that I do. There are people around the photo industry and around the publishing industry that are trying to support the industry itself, and they're trying to support a broken model that has been broken for decades, but a lot of careers, a lot of jobs are based around this, and this is a classic bottleneck of information, a classic situation of control, saying if you're going to be a legitimate photographer, if you're going to publish a photography book, if you don't do it with us, it's not legitimate. And the phrase that really rubs me the wrong way that I hear all the time is this term vanity publishing. And you hear a lot of publishing industry people who are working for these classic publishing houses use that as a slur, as a derogatory term. And what they're basically telling you is if you don't do the classic publishing route, if you don't do the classic photography route, then you're not legitimate because we haven't chosen you and we haven't told you that you're special. And the reason I'm saying this is over the last almost 11 years of traveling the world working for Blurb, I have watched photographer after photographer get involved in horrible financial publishing deals that have ruined a lot of people. They're paying upwards of $15,000 to $30,000 up front to get a publishing deal. They're often getting a book they don't want. It's often taking much longer. They're often getting very, very few copies of that book, and the rest of the books remain at the publisher. And oftentimes, sometimes, even when the books are remaindered, they can't get their hands on them. I've had friends who paid $15,000 for 15 copies of a book, and the publisher kept the rest, and then when they didn't sell, they were destroyed for tax purposes. I've seen photographers pay $50,000. I've heard stories of photographers paying $100,000. Vanity publishing is a slur coming from that side of the aisle. But here is the legitimate truth, professional photographer. And if you're a pro photographer and you're listening to this, you better listen and you better take it to heart. If you are paying a publisher to do your book, you are vanity publishing. There is no two ways about it. I have seen this happen at photo festivals, where a publisher will descend on, I had this happen to one of my students. Publisher descended on one of my students and said, oh, we love you, we think you're great, just give us $30,000 up front and we'll do your book. Now, they also turned around to her and said, don't tell anyone else here that that's what we're asking from you. Now, she came straight over to me and said, hey, something funny just happened. This publisher just asked me for 30 grand. I said, yeah, they're fishing. They're looking for people who are willing to pony up that money, and they'll print anybody's book because they want to keep that money to keep the presses going. She went and told another publisher at the same event, and that person went ballistic as well and said to the original publisher, you cannot do that. If you are a pay-for-play publisher, you need to be upfront about that. Again, this rubs me the wrong way because people were self-publishing before they were publishing. There were no publishing houses when people started to put books out into the world. So remember that. This has been around for a long time. And then yesterday, what triggered me wanting to illustrate this to you, because I don't like to see talented photographers get into horrible financial situations or just become really unhappy, jaded, angry people because their publishing deal didn't work out. I see this and hear this all the time. It is the most common deal I see. Believe it or not, people think I'm making that up. So yesterday, I'm on LinkedIn, and I see a post by a guy named Rick Smolin, who I think is one of the most intelligent people who's ever floated through the professional photography world. He's more than a photographer. He does a myriad of things, and he does all of them well, and he's been doing this for a long, long time. But he wrote this post, and he said, 40 years ago today, 100 of the world's leading photojournalists from 30 nations spread out across the vast continent of Australia over the course of a single 24-hour period to collaborate on the creation of A Day in the Life of Australia. And for any of you who are old enough to remember the 80s and 90s and the Day in the Life books, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I had approached, this is where it gets interesting, I had approached 35 publishers with the concept, and every single one of them turned it down, so we ended up self-publishing. Let me just state this again. 35 publishers said, you're going to whiff. No one's interested. Won't work. Again, this is a theme I've heard. I know a photographer in LA. She took a book to 40 publishers who all turned her down. She went out, did the book on her own, became bestseller. One of the original 40 came back and said, oh, we get it now. We're gonna subsidize the next 2-3 books in this series. Oftentimes, publishers want you to believe they know what sells, and that's not true. And the numbers do not lie. So, self-published, and the book went on to become the #1 book in Australia the year it was published. So from no from the publishers to self-publishing to #1 book. That is incredible. And that's not luck. That's because Smolin knows exactly what he's doing. That book launched a Day in the Life series of Japan, America, USSR, Canada, Spain, etc. Produced with my longtime friend David Elliott Cohen, and my incredibly talented wife Jennifer Irwit. That series was largely credited for creating the mass market for coffee table books. And today there are more than 5 million copies of these books on people's coffee tables around the world. All I'm saying is, sometimes these traditional models don't work. And in some cases, they haven't worked for a long time. I can look at the professional photography industry. There's all kinds of models that don't work. And I'll leave you with this one last thing before we get to these good questions. I have a friend who's in the publishing world. And he's one of the coolest, most down-to-earth people I know, and that's rare for coming from that world in my experience. And there are plenty of publishers out there who I really like, and getting a good publishing deal can be a very intelligent move. And publishers can do things that oftentimes an individual can't if the deal is right. You know, if the money is right, if the book is right, if the timing is right, if the marketing and distribution are right, it can be a really good thing. So I'm not down on doing that. I'm down on making bad decisions based on terms like Vanity Publishing. So my friend in the publishing community says to me, you know, photographers come to me to get book deals, and if I like their work, I can get them a book deal. But he said, what they don't realize is the walls to my kingdom fell down 5 years ago. And all they have to do when they come to me, because they see me as a gatekeeper, all they have to do is walk around. They're better off on their own. That was 5 years ago, at least, that he told me that. And it just etched itself into my brain, and I look out and watch photographer after photographer going down that path. And I would say upwards of 75 to 80% of those deals do not end well for the participants. So take it for what it's worth. All right, every time I do a Q&A, and I'm sorry to do so many Q&As in a row, but I am so busy right now. And thank you to everybody who sent questions in. I am one person with one opinion. You may love it, you may hate it. Let's get started before my thing glitches, which we all know. I'm challenged. Hey Dan, I'm determined to document, oh wait a second. The first question was about actually a blurb question. Between Booksmart, whether or not to use Booksmart or Bookwright. This is a mind-boggling question to me. Booksmart was the original, and this is question 1 by the way. Booksmart was the original blurb software. That was stopped being updated at least 5 years ago. We switched over to Bookwright. Why on earth anyone would use Booksmart is a total mystery to me, other than the fact that a lot of us just don't want to learn a new piece of software. If you're at that level where you can't be inconvenienced to learn a new piece of software, The future of as a bookmaker is probably going to be limited. Bookwright, which is the latest version and the current version of the Blurb software, which is free, downloadable, it works on anything. It is not a perfect software by any stretch of the imagination, but it is light years beyond Booksmart. I am learning 2 new pieces of software this week that are exponentially more complicated than anything Blurb has ever done. I'm trying to learn After Effects. Have you ever looked at the monitor when After Effects is open? It's like Premiere. Your inner child, again, goes in the corner and just huddles up and cries because there are legitimately 100 million options at any one given time. I get lost in the windows and have to restart the program. That's how far back I am. I'm at the bottom of the mountain and I'm in a Speedo with flip-flops, and we're talking Everest, right? So I got problems. So don't use Booksmart. I don't know why anyone would do that again, other than it's just what you're used to. Take the time to test drive Bookwright. It's not complicated, but it does a lot of things that Booksmart doesn't, and it's just a better piece of software. So that's my 2 cents on that. And also, we make a plugin for InDesign if you don't want to use any of this, or you can do a PDF uploader, or you can use Lightroom. So there's a myriad of options on how you can get from A to B with making a book. Second question. Hey Dan, I'm determined to document the post-war militarization of my country. Wow, that is a hardcore story. I would love to know your thoughts on approach. How should you approach an area of people without disrupting the activity that is going on there and while retaining the genuine candid quality vis-a-vis when cameras aren't appreciated? How should you break the ice? In other words, how do you documentary photographers manage to capture genuine moments in areas where they might not be welcome? I could chat to soldiers and do portraits, but I don't want my project to be a book of portraits at the same time. I don't want to get arrested for discreetly taking photographs of the gradual militarization. Wow. First of all, I don't know what country you're in. So I don't know what your laws about press freedoms are. In America, technically we have press freedoms, but those get trampled on a pretty regular basis. And pretty much everyone I know who's been in the field photographing things or people who don't want to be photographed, we've all had issues. I have been punched, kicked, clubbed, gassed, and almost shot in the head with a rubber bullet. It got the guy behind me. An older guy went down like a bag of potatoes, man, and it was not good, but he survived. I've also been detained against my will. I've been held at gunpoint. I've had ATF put a gun to my head at a roadblock just for fun. I've been taken in a van and driven out in the desert and dropped off by a law enforcement group that tends to patrol the US-Mexico border. It happens. And so each situation is completely different, and you have to learn how to navigate those scenes. Today, the penalty is different than it was 20 years ago. It's also different at my age compared to when I was 25. When I was 25 and with cameras, one, is a different world, no internet, no phones, no nothing. There was no sense of what I was doing was going to immediately hit the airwaves. Nowadays, they think everything you're doing is going directly on social and is going directly out in the world and is directly trying to attack whatever you're doing, whatever they're doing. So it's hard. You oftentimes have to talk, navigate your way in. The other thing you can do is to just see what happens by being completely and utterly upfront with the people that you're trying to photograph and say, look, I'm doing a project on post-war militarization. You never know. Maybe the folks on that side of the militarized aspect of your society are like, look, we're constantly getting blasted in the press and it's not accurate. So yeah, why don't you come with us and we'll show you what we're dealing with? Because remember, whether it's Border Patrol or FBI or ATF or Sheriff's Department or whatever it is, oftentimes the lives of the people who are working for these organizations are very, very different than you might expect. Those jobs can be very different. Those jobs can be underpaid, undertrained, and incredibly dangerous. When you get into the field with them, sometimes you get a very different understanding of how bad these situations are. So it's good. We need people working on both sides of the fence. And we need people that are working on both sides of the same story instead of coming from one angle and saying, you know, whatever, I'm going to go to the border and work on the activist angle. You go to the border and you work on the activist angle, but then you work on the authority side, and then you work on the Mexican side, and you work on the American side, and you paint a picture without trying to let your emotions and your politics get involved. You're talking about a long, long project that may take you a long time to get access to, but it's interesting. And the militarization of police forces that's happening here too in the States, it's been happening for a long time, especially after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan with all the leftover tech and kit that was coming back. So I see it here. I'll just give you a little brief story. There's an event here every year in Santa Fe that's very interesting. It's very unique. And it's primarily, at least when I first moved here, it's primarily a locals event. It's spiraled out a little bit. There's a little more tourism now. But the first year I went with my camera, a folding 6.6, 6.7 rangefinder in my Leica, and I'm wandering around taking pictures. I saw, no joke, I saw local police, I saw state police, sheriff's department, SWAT, and special tactical units that were on rooftops legitimately with tripod machine guns and ski masks. That's in the United States because there was so much gang activity at this event and there was so much violence going back over the last 20 years at this event. And they kept trying to move it. They'd move it from a Saturday night to a Friday night to a Thursday night. They'd move locations. They tried everything and they really had a problem. I could not believe it. When I looked up on rooftops and I saw these machine guns on tripods, I was like, these are like civilians. These are local families out in this field, and it showed you how crazy this situation had become. So it happens. Okay, question number 3. I'm going to go ahead and check these off. Vanity Publishing, check. Booksmart versus Bookwright, check. Militarization, check. We are now on to the 4th question, which is, hey Dan, what time of life do you think photographers do their best work, young and fresh, or maybe old and experienced? I would, if I had to guess, it would be young and fresh. I certainly haven't made anything good in years. I don't really shoot anymore. That might have something to do with it. But the best work I did was probably late 90s to early 2000s. It had been after getting out of school, been out for a decade, worked every day as a photographer, did all kinds of assignments, figured out what I was and what I wasn't, what I liked and what I didn't, understood the industry better, had a better understanding, and just got rid of all that garbage that I thought being a photographer was about, and I just burrowed into what I thought I could do with a camera. And there was a 5-year stretch there where I probably made all my best work. Now I'm not even sure if I could do that work, physically or mentally, if I could do that work. I'm so rusty. And photography is it's like a triathlon. It's like cycling. It's like whatever. You have to get good. Fly fishing is another example. When I haven't fished for a long time and I go out, I'm all over the place. I forget how to tie flies. I forget my net. I forget how to cast in a wind. I forget how to roll cast. I forget what fly to tie. All of these things, it just takes practice. And so I would guesstimate that younger the better. And also you tend to be hungrier. Question number 5. Super interested to hear your observations of litter. How people deal with waste and what can be done with waste is my current likely lifelong project. Well, I commend you. That is a commendable project to spend your life on. Litter, funny you should ask. Last weekend, I was able to get out for 2 days. I do not like going out on the weekends because typically there's too many people now. No matter where I go, there's too many people. But I was stuck. I had to work for Blurb during the week. I got to start up again, Monday of this week. So it was the only chance I had. And I went out with my hair on fire and I'm trying to record every kind of info. The litter that I saw along the roads, at roadside parks, and even in remote places was absolutely appalling. There's a huge campaign happening here in New Mexico right now. I think it's called Toss No Mas, which is don't throw anymore. And they're talking about trying to get people to stop throwing garbage along the highways, but it's everywhere. Littering to me is a product of a faulty education system. So when you have a faulty education system, which we do here in America, and we need to put serious money into it. It's not that the teachers aren't good or they don't have the desire to do right. They do. It's the system is working against them and the budgeting is working against them. And the curriculum is working against them. We have to stop having states monitor students in formulaic ways. Bad education or undereducation leads to crime. It leads to violence. It leads to poverty. It leads to corruption. And it leads to things like litter. Because that is just an uneducated view of the world of saying, I just don't care. And I was literally last weekend was camped along a river that was really hard to get to, and mud and snow. And there were times I had to get out on foot and scout just to see if I could even get the van there. And where I ended up pulling over for the night, someone had just been and thrown, there was Corona bottles, there were Gatorade bottles, there were water bottles, there was trash, there was food, there was just everything. And that's just from an undereducated person who does not understand the consequences and doesn't care. That can also come from people who get up in the morning who do not have a sense of hope towards the future. And hope is an incredibly powerful thing. If you look at a lot of the unsavory events that are happening in the world by people that, inexplicable violence, a lot of that is based on the fact that these were young folks who got up and said, I don't have a chance. I have no hope. There's no future for me. So why do I care about my short-term situation? If I have to commit violence or do whatever it is, I don't have any hope. Hope is one of the single most powerful things in the world. Imagine if you could unite people in regions of the world that are violence prone, issue prone, even here in the States. Look, we have so many issues here. The last 4 years has really illustrated how many we have. If you unite people behind hope, we can do anything. but that is not an easy scenario. So that is my feelings about litter. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I see it getting worse. And until we fix some of our major systems. I have these conversations with myself a lot of like all the broken systems, education, healthcare, government, immigration. And you say, what would you fix first? Environment. How do you solve education without fixing climate change first? Because if you fix education but you don't address climate change, then you're hosed anyway. All of them are catch-22s. Our government is broken, both parties. You got to fix that because now they're purposely working against the population. They're undermining us on purpose for profit. Got to fix that. Education, healthcare. Oh yeah, all the people who are making money off of healthcare now are like, it's impossible to fix, right? Because they got their hands in the kitty. They don't want it to change. We're a first world country. We have more money than any country in the world. We're, quote, more advanced than any country, but we can't fix healthcare. Oh, there's no such thing as universal healthcare. Oh, it's people on the dole. It's just ridiculous. So I have no answers. I can spout all day long or do useless things like tweet about it. Getting involved in locally and starting there is probably your best bet. Okay, question number 6. Dan, I like the idea of a visual diary type of quarterly zine. I do too. And my first issue with Blurb came out good, but I'm having trouble deciding what a magazine worthy or book worthy shot. In other words, is there room in publishing one's own work for less than portfolio level photographs? Absolutely. If we only published portfolio images, nobody would be publishing. You'd maybe publish once every 5 years. You'd get enough to end it, to create a book. I hold portfolio level images as sacred. I am not a modern photographer. I'm not an online photographer who's putting everything out and telling everyone it's great. I would never do that. I haven't made a great photograph in years. Those are incredibly rare. A journal type thing, a zine, it doesn't have to be about great photography. And frankly, the public doesn't care about your great photography or my great photography. They don't care. They're looking for good stories. So I publish stuff all the time, and in my journal, there's no holds barred. It's impossible to ruin a journal, and so you publish whatever you want in there, and you have fun with it, and you enjoy it, and you learn about photography, you learn about storytelling, and you learn about publishing. So I wouldn't sweat that. There is one of my all-time favorite books called Voyages by Raymond Depardon, who's a French Magnum photographer. And Voyages is one of my all-time favorite books. It's very small. Trim size is small, but it's thick. It's probably 400 pages, soft cover, or maybe it's a flexi cover. It's a book of his travels around the world, but there's a lot of photographs in there that are not portfolio images. But it's one of my favorite books because it just shows you what Raymond's life was like in traveling. It was all like black and white 35 Leica stuff from all over the world. And he shot famous war photographs over the years and a lot of other things that really put him on the map. But this is just kind of like, hey, these are my voyages around the world. These are where I was, what I was doing, whatever, and they're beautiful. And they're simple photographs of simple moments during every day. And it's fantastic if you can get your hands on it. Question number 7. AG23, any new news? Funny you should say that. As we speak, the second issue of AG23 is at the printer. We are in line to be printed, which means I will get a proof print first. I have to look at the proof print and make sure everything is okay. I'm assuming it will be. And then I go back to them and say, go ahead and do the print run, which is 2,000 copies of a 6x9 soft cover zine. It's a 6x9 blurb trade book with 70-pound paper and a matte cover. It's not fancy. If anyone who has the first issue knows that. That is not our purpose, to put out a coffee table book or put something precious out that is expensive that people have to pay top dollar for. No, the zine, and I'm going to do a whole film about this when the second issue comes out. The zine is a catalyst. It's a taste. That's all. All we're saying is, in the second issue, there's 5 people. These 5 people are talented. They're interesting. Their work is worthy of your time and attention. And oh, by the way, here's one of their stories. Our goal is threefold: zine, to website, to contributor. Yes, brand marketing managers out there, we are driving people away from our brand. There is nothing in the zine about Blurb. There is nothing about Beyond. We are saying to you, these are 5 people that we think are talented. The theme of the second issue is transition. All of these people are either in transition as artists, or their work is in transition, or the subject matter of what they're covering is in transition. See how witty we are? Zoe Sadikirski did the design. It's beautiful. We want you to look at the zine. and go to the site to see the follow-up information about who these contributors are. And then we want you to leave us. We want you to go away, and we want you to go to their individual sites and learn about who they are and what they're doing. They do not have to be professionals, although in this case, we have one writer and we have 4 photographers. All 4 photographers are professionals, and the writer has already put out, I think, 3, 4, 5 books. I met him. He lives here in Santa Fe. He writes about agriculture in the American West. He's got a very interesting take on an aspect of agriculture that I think is really important and affects every single person who will see this zine. That's why he's in there. So that's where AG23 is. Issue 3 is already filled. I've got all the contributors lined up. I am trying to verify one of them who hasn't gotten back to me, but I want to make sure that he was still interested. And if not, then I may just go with I think we have 6 people for issue 3. I may just go with 5, but that's it. It is a ton of work doing this, and it is incredibly expensive. And we have Beyond Clothing to thank for that, because they are the ones who have paid for all of this. And frankly, let me tell you something. I have never had a collaboration partner remotely like Beyond. They have not only paid for everything that my crazy ideas, I need letterhead, I need a wax stamp, I need packaging. They've paid for everything, not just the zine and the print run and paying the contributors. They've paid for everything. They have never once come in and said, we want a logo in the zine, or we want this to point in this direction, or we want this, whatever. Because we said from day one, nothing about Blurb, nothing about Beyond. That's not what this is about. We do plenty of marketing at Blurb. Beyond does plenty of marketing. There's plenty of other things that they do to market what they're doing. We don't need to do that with this. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm very excited, and I'm nervous as hell because, you know, when I'm working with anyone else's work, it makes me nervous. I lose sleep at night. I'm up for hours at a time thinking, did I miss something? Am I doing them justice? Are they going to be happy? I would say that every issue takes probably a year off of my life, but I think it could be worth it. And really, am I doing anything that matters in the long run? No, I'm sucking up your oxygen and eating your food. Okay, question number 9. Hi Dan, do you have any insights on finding interesting stories to document? What kind of research goes into finding these stories? Man, I've had this question a lot. That was question number 9. I can't tell you what to shoot. I find this, and I'm not trying to be mean about this. What are you interested in? What do you think about in the morning? Here's my guess. If you spend a lot of time online, if you spend a lot of time surfing, if you spend a lot of time ingesting micro doses of information, you often lose the ability for long-term thought. That is a physiological change in the brain that started happening with the invention of the internet. And it has been like a grenade going off in the brains of humanity. I read. You cannot read this book and not come away with a myriad of photo story ideas. You cannot read this book and come away with a massive number of photo story ideas. I can't investigate my own community without doing that. I have a million different interests: cycling, hiking, cycling, climbing. I think I said cycling twice. I do it a lot, so I guess it works. Hiking, rock hounding, archaeology, anthropology, it goes chemistry, biology, space, propulsion, all of these things that I find interesting that I really don't know that much about, even though I have minors in Spanish and anthropology. Yeah, you have to understand what do you think about when you first thought that pops into your head in the morning? What's the last thought before you go to sleep at night? There's where your story ideas are going to be. Question number 10, and I think we're going to call it a day, and I might do a second recording. I don't know. Alrighty, I'm back. It died. Both the camera and the recorder literally were dead. Not just went dark, they were off. What is it about my death ray that just destroys this stuff? So I don't know what's happening with Kodak, but film was actually one of the most profitable divisions of the company because the margin on a roll of film was incredibly high. I have thought for years that Kodak would spin and sell off their film division, probably to a company somewhere in Eastern Europe. That would be my guess. That was my guess forever. I have not been following this at all. I don't know, and I don't really care. I kind of feel like that's a data that I don't really need rattling around in my brain. But I think the good news is that there's a lot of people out there who are keeping film alive, that are younger photographers who grew up with mobile phones in their hand. They're not exactly enamored by the technology like my generation was, where it was all new to us. And I think when you grow up with a phone in your hand and digital cameras at your disposal, oftentimes doing things in the analog world is a novelty. It's new, and it's great because, you know, these film hipsters on YouTube, They catch a lot of abuse, but I've mentioned this many times before. They're keeping film alive. They're doing a lot to keep people out there using it. I think choices will continue to go down and prices will continue to go up. That's just the way the market works, whether you're talking about film or petroleum or anything else. Hopefully they keep it alive. Hopefully it keeps going. Even though you went digital, I wouldn't be afraid to shoot film. Kodak, all of us owe everything we are talking about in photography, in part. Every single one of us owes that to Kodak. And Kodak, when I worked there, they were the punching bag of the industry. Photographers can be really vicious people and can really do things and say things that are unconscionable because of ego and insecurity. And when I was a Kodak rep, I took a lot of abuse in the field from people who just refused to give credit to what that company had done. I mean, they are by no means perfect, and they made a million mistakes even while I was at the company. But Kodachrome, Ektachrome, Tri-X, Plus X, Panatomic X, all the papers, all the chemistry, all the sponsorships. Holy cow. Just at the time that I was there, the sponsorship dollars and products that we gave away ran into the tens of millions of dollars. And I swear, photographers would literally get sponsored by Kodak. Kodak would underwrite projects, underwrite travel, underwrite exhibitions, and the second one was over, they would bail and go to somebody else. I mean, it was really, working for Kodak opened my eyes to what professional photography actually was. And there's a nice ethereal element to it, and there is a major dark side. And so, I don't know. I mean, chemical and pharma, if you're looking for companies that are the most profitable in the world right now outside of tech, you'd have to look at oil and gas and you'd have to look at pharma. So I get why they would do that, but I don't know all of this stuff in detail. So that's about all I can say. All right, we're going to stop this at 10 questions, and I think I might do a second recording just for fun. We'll see. Remember, one person, one opinion, nothing more.